Kyle Busch has announced his 2024 Truck Series schedule. DJ Khaled is interested in becoming a NASCAR owner, and Frankie Muniz might become a part owner of a NASCAR team. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the last couple of days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Zane Smith's 2024 City of Refuge scheme that we'll see this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. This paint scheme's solid. It's not fantastic. I think it's okay. Hopefully Zane Smith, though, can have a really strong run with this paint scheme this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2024 Money Line scheme that we'll see throughout 2024. This scheme is not as good as the one I think he had last year, but I still think it looks alright. I like the teal look of it. I think it'll look better on the racetrack than from the rendering. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Carson Osbar's 2024 Premier Security scheme that we'll see this weekend. This is probably the best Premier Security scheme I've seen from Carson Osbar up to this point. This is definitely better than the one he had on his Xfinity car. Hopefully Carson can have a good run with this scheme this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2024 Xfinity Mobile scheme. This is an all-purple car. I do like it a lot, though. It's very simple, simplistic, and hopefully Tyler Reddick can have a good run this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2024 High Point scheme. There's not a ton of differences from the old High Point schemes, to be honest, but honestly, it's not that bad. It's been kind of the same thing for the last few years, but honestly, that's not a bad thing overall. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Colby Howard's 2024 Project Hope scheme. I like this scheme quite a bit. There's a lot of good colors of it, and I do like the cause of what they're bringing. I think it looks really solid, and hopefully Colby Howard can have a good run with the scheme this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Sam Mayer's 2024 Club Car scheme that we'll see at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. This is a solid scheme in my opinion, not fantastic, but it is a solid paint scheme. Hopefully Sam Mayer can have a good run at Las Vegas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is AJ Allmendinger's 2024 Campers and RV scheme that we'll see in the Xfinity race at Atlanta this weekend and a couple of races throughout the year. This is decent, not fantastic. Hopefully he'll see him have a good run in this scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Hunter Nemechek's 2024 Family Dollar scheme. This gives me Juan Pablo Montoya vibes. I noticed the Oreo scheme, the Oreo sponsorship on the side of the car. I like this scheme quite a bit, to be honest. Like I said, it gives me Juan Pablo Montoya vibes, which I think that is a pretty good thing. Hopefully John Hunter can have a good run with this paint scheme. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2024 Latitude Aero scheme that we'll see at Atlanta. This is okay in my opinion, not too fantastic. Hopefully Spencer Boyd can continue the really strong start to the year with this paint scheme this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Raising Cane's. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Raising Cane's new in-store billboard marketing campaign around Tony Breininger will be at all of its locations in the U.S. through April. This is absolutely huge. Raising Cane's had a big sponsorship with Tony Breininger over the last year or so. They have sponsored in a couple races in the last year, and I do believe that they are going to sponsor in multiple races in ARCA this year in 2024. To see that Raising Cane's is getting behind her, especially a major chain and probably one of the better fast food restaurants in the country, I think is really awesome to see. So I'm very happy about this and glad to see that Raising Cane's is going to be working with her throughout the year, and glad to see that they're going to be sponsoring her and working with her. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR Manager. As NASCAR Manager is officially available on all the iOS and Google stores on every phone available, and I think on every tablet available as well. This is basically the new version of F1 Manager and other manager games, style games in the sporting world. Now, one thing you know is that no real-world drivers have been made available. I don't know if they're going to make them available, but if they do, I will definitely try it out. From what people said, it's been hit or miss with some people, but some people have really enjoyed NASCAR Manager up to this point. Once they do add real-world drivers, I think a lot more people will definitely be interested for sure. But honestly, from what I've seen, the game looks really good, and I really hope that it ends up being extremely successful for NASCAR itself, because a manager game like that could be really successful for the sport overall. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. As after the Daytona 500 command he gave, he basically went on Twitter reflecting on that. And he said he loved the energy of being at the Daytona 500. And he gave a lot of shout outs to people like Jimmy Johnson and Bubba Wallace and the King, Richard Petty, as well. It was really cool to see that the Rock decided to stick around and give the command for the Daytona 500. He had a lot of incredible energy and a lot of incredible excitement at this year's Daytona 500. And it's really cool to see that he's invested in the sport and got to stay a little bit longer. He did promote the UFL, but that's not really besides the point. Anyways, it's cool to see that The Rock was interested and sticked around for a day, and it's cool to see that he had a lot of interest in the sport especially. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rick Hendrick. Now, it was reported by SiriusXM NASCAR Radio that Rick Hendrick was on there and was basically reflecting on getting the Daytona 500 victory. Basically, on Monday, Rick Hendrick's team, Hendrick Motorsports, is able to win the 2024 Daytona 500 with William Byron. And what's really cool about this win, it was exactly on the 40-year anniversary of Hendrick Motorsports' first start. This is also Hendrick Motorsports' 302nd career victory in the NASCAR Cup Series. Basically, 302nd win for the team and organization. You think about this 40-year anniversary, what all Hendrick Motorsports has been able to accomplish, and everything they have been able to do as an organization. It's an incredible feat, and a massive congratulations to Hendrick Motorsports on being able to win on the 40-year anniversary of that day. Seeing William Byron win, that guy is going to win a lot of races in Cup. He's already won 11 races up to this point, and he's going to win multiple championships as well. I think it is phenomenal and incredible to see Hendrick Motorsports get the win on the 40-year anniversary. I think that's an incredible and phenomenal accomplishment. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the CAA. As it was reported by Adam Stern that the CAA will work with NASCAR Studios to develop strategic relations across existing IP in film, TV, music, and podcasts, and also in the growth of diversity as well. This is absolutely huge. Obviously, with the success of NASCAR Full Speed, you're starting to see a lot of major movement happening in regards to the growth of NASCAR. There's also a lot of talk of Days of Thunders 2 potentially coming into play as well, which could be another major moment for the sport. We have seen a lot more people tune into NASCAR, a lot more people that weren't even fans of the sport getting interested, especially as of late. And having a company like the CAA coming into play to help with that, I think is phenomenal and absolutely incredible. So nonetheless, I really hope there's going to be a lot of success from this overall, and glad to see that the CAA is going to be working with NASCAR and working with the teams as well to try to grow the sport in a big way. I'm really happy about this and glad to see the CAA is showing a lot of interest in working with NASCAR. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chris Hacker. Basically, a photo surfaced on Chris Hacker's Twitter page of him being officially released from the hospital. I am really happy to see this. For those who don't know, I think it was on Valentine's Day that he was in a head-on crash. I think a semi had crashed into him, if I'm not mistaken, and basically was in the hospital with very serious injuries. Really just happy to see that Chris Hacker has been released from the hospital, and a lot of people are expecting that Chris is going to make a full and speedy recovery. Hope the people around him can help him out, and I'm just really happy to see that Chris Hacker has been released from the hospital. He had really serious injuries and hoping that he can recover really soon and get back behind the wheel. It sucks to see him not being behind the wheel currently at the moment. Hopefully he can get back behind the wheel, hopefully in the future, and hopefully he can recover from his injuries really, really soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mason Maggio. As it was announced, I believe it was on Monday or Tuesday, actually Tuesday or Wednesday, that Mason Maggio will drive the 21 truck for Iridium Motorsports once again at Atlanta Motor Speedway. They will make their first start of the 2024 season, as while they did attempt to make the Truck Series race at Daytona, they unfortunately failed to qualify to make the show. They are expected to run a select number of races throughout the 2024 season, but the number of races has not been made clear up to this point. I'm glad to see Mason Maggio back behind the wheel, though. He's been a solid driver, in my opinion, in the past. Has gotten some top 25s and top 30s in trucks in Xfinity as well. Hopefully Mason can have a really strong run with this team. It is a super speedway race. Let's hope they don't crash themselves so they can show up to more races. But again, I'm very happy to see that Mason Maggio is getting back behind the wheel of the seat this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Natalie Decker. Now, if you watch a NASCAR Xfinity Series race after the Daytona 500, you saw Natalie Decker lead her first laps in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. She led 7 laps and was able to finish in the top 20 in 18th place. While that is not a win for Natalie Decker, I've got to say that she was very happy that she was able to keep her nose clean and actually lead laps as well. She is now, I believe, the first female driver to lead laps in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Since I think it was Danica Patrick who was the last one to lead laps. I think she was only the 3rd female driver to lead laps in NASCAR Xfinity Series history. That is absolutely huge for her. And I got to say, I've kind of criticized Natalie Decker in the past, but she had a very impressive and really great run in that race. Again, I hope she does get some more starts and opportunities to run this year. I think it's good to see her have the chance and opportunity to compete in the Xfinity Series, and I'm really happy to see that she was able to be very, very competitive. Again, cool to see her lead some laps, and we'll see whatever races she decides to run because it's unclear how many races she exactly is going to run this season. But again, very happy to see Natalie Decker was able to have a very solid and great run in the first race of the year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Truck Series race at Daytona TV ratings. As it was reported by Fox Sports that NASCAR Truck Series race at Daytona scored 1.057 million viewers, the best since 2021. Obviously, the race was not very good, but it's really awesome to see that the Truck Series race at Daytona was able to have the most viewership it's had in a few years, which is a shame for the Daytona 500 TV ratings that we'll get into in a little bit because unfortunately those were down from previous years. But I gotta say, seeing the racing, at least the ratings go up for the duels and the Truck Series race at Daytona, I find phenomenal and really, really incredible. It's a shame it didn't, like I said, translate into the Daytona 500, but obviously that was because the race got delayed a day. It's a shame there, but nonetheless, glad to see the Truck Series race at Daytona had increased TV ratings. Even though the race was not very good in my opinion, I think it is really cool to see that the ratings at least were up for that event. Very phenomenal and really awesome stuff overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain versus Joey Logano. Now, if you watched the Daytona 500, you saw what happened with about 10 laps to go in the race. Joey Logano was trying to make a move to the outside. I believe it was Brad Keselowski trying to get up the second position, and he was trying to pass Ross Chastain. Basically, Chastain put a lot of blocks on near the end of the event, and then basically, William Byron, Alex Bowman got this huge run and ran into the back of Brad Keselowski. Keselowski goes back up the racetrack, collects Joey Logano, then Daniel Suarez gets clipped by Todd Gilliland, and it caused a very big wreck in an incident. Joey Logano was not very happy with Ross Chastain and basically called him out by saying that Ross Chastain was throwing a lot of really, really bad blocks on the racetrack. Ross Chastain spoke to the media as well, and he says he was a little too aggressive in certain situations near the end of the event. I find it funny that Joey Logano is calling out Ross Chastain, considering Joey Logano is historically one of the most aggressive drivers when it comes to super speedway racing. Sure, he is one of the better super speedway racers in the field, but he's also extremely over-aggressive as well and has also caused a lot of wrecks in his day of racing as well. Again, Joey Logano was calling out a lot of drivers, calling out the etiquette. He was pissed off even, I think, at Todd Gilliland at one point in the race, which he's technically now a teammate, considering Todd Gilliland's with Front Row, and they now have an alliance with Team Penske. I just find it very funny to see that Joey Logano is getting upset and really is getting frustrated with of course, Chastain and Todd Gilliland, when, like I said, Joey Logano has basically had issues already with Ty Gibbs this season and has gotten involved already in a lot of incidents on the racetrack as well. Maybe he can light a fire under Joey Logano's butt to see if he can be very, very competitive. It's interesting for sure, though, that Joey Logano was not very happy about some of the racing on the track and the blocking. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. Now, Hailie Deegan made her first full-time start in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at Daytona International Speedway. Unfortunately, she didn't get to finish even Stage 1 because she was involved in the first big incident that took place, I believe, on lap 22 or lap 23. Daniel Suarez, I think, got turned by Jeremy Clements after checking up. Daniel Suarez clipped Sam Mayer, and unfortunately, Hailie Deegan and Kyle Weatherman had nowhere to go, and they were caught up in the incident and wreck. She then spoke to the media after the incident, and she says that she has a love-hate relationship with Daytona and historically has not ran really good here, at least on the oval track. And again, you go back to her first full-time Truck Series start where she also crashed and hit the inside wall really hard to try to avoid a wreck. Look, Hailie Deegan historically has not been amazing at super speedways, and it's not a really good start for her in her Xfinity Series career on a full-time basis. But to be fair, it really wasn't her fault this time around. Again, she just caught up in someone else's mess when Daniel Suarez got turned. She had nowhere to go, and I saw a lot of people trying to criticize her for it, but again, it's her first start. And people are already calling her a bust up to this point in the Xfinity Series after one race. It's a super speedway race. You've got 2 back-to-back super speedway races in a row. I don't know if she's going to run good at Atlanta, but let's not jump the gun on calling her a bust just yet, simply because of one super speedway wreck that really wasn't even her fault to begin with, and she just got caught up in it. If we get farther in the season and down the road and she's struggling, then we're going to have a lot of conversations about that. But right now, at this point, I'm not jumping the gun on Hailie Deegan just yet, based on a one race at Daytona, which really wasn't even her fault to begin with. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Aric Almirola. Now, I believe it was after the Daytona 500 that Aric Almirola put out a tweet reflecting on not running the Daytona 500, saying he did wish he had an opportunity to run the Daytona 500 this year, but he's really excited to be working with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2024. Aric Almirola is expected to run around 15 to 16 NASCAR Xfinity Series races, and he's going to think his first race is going to be at Richmond this year. There are some other drivers who could get behind the wheel of the 20 car because John Nemechek is going to run 10 races. I think Denny Hamlin's going to run a start with that team potentially this year. I wouldn't even be shocked or surprised if Bubba Wallace or a couple other drivers in the Toyota camp make a start with JGR this year. Maybe they get Carl Edwards out of retirement. But speaking on Aric Almirola, I really think Aric Almirola is probably happy that he didn't run the Daytona 500 this year, and I think he's really excited to be in the Xfinity Series. I think he is going to be a major threat at races this year. I think he will get a couple wins considering he did run a select couple Xfinity races last year, especially at Sonoma, and was able to win in that 29 car for RSS, which of course was prepared by Stewart-Haas Racing. I think that Aric Almirola is going to have a really strong and good year with the team. And like I said, I'm just excited to see what he can do this season overall at JGR. I bet he wanted to run the Daytona 500, but I bet he's also happy that he doesn't have destroyed cars. Hopefully Aric Almirola can have a good year in Xfinity, which again, I think that Aric Almirola will have a very solid and good year with JGR in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2024 season. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Cindric versus Cory LaJoie. We'll get to the last lap controversy here in just a little bit, but let's talk about what caused that last lap wreck. So coming down the front stretch, Ross Chastain was getting a really, really big run to the inside. Cory LaJoie gives a really, really big pump to Austin Cindric, who goes up onto the racetrack and unfortunately gets Cindric squirrely and loose and ends up turning Ross Chastain around. Cindric and Chastain then go back into the grass and they come up the racetrack and cause a big wreck, which ends up ending the race. Now, Austin Cindric basically was not very happy with Cory LaJoie after the race and basically said, good for him that he was able to finish in 4th position after basically wrecking me and causing multiple incidents throughout these events. Cory LaJoie was then asked about it and basically was notified that Austin Cindric was not happy with him. He basically said, I don't really care, and says that Austin Cindric and Cory LaJoie are not friends on the racetrack. And even said that Austin Cindric has done a lot of stupid things for sure. Which, really, let's be honest, Austin Cindric has not really done a lot of dumb things in the last couple years. Really, would say he kind of did a dumb thing in the 22 500, which led him, of course, winning the 500, getting into his teammate. But Cindric really hasn't done anything recently. And Cory LaJoie, let's be perfectly honest with ourselves, was extremely over-aggressive in the Truck Series race at Daytona as well. He caused a couple incidents throughout the week, and in my opinion, he was a little over-aggressive. Now, will these two get into it with each other throughout the season? It's certainly possible. I don't really expect much from this week in Atlanta, considering we are at a super speedway-like track this week. I don't expect much to really come from it. It's going to be interesting to see how things work out, though, when it comes between both of these drivers, because I do believe that there are going to be some tension between both these guys throughout the year. But personally, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to come out from this week. Again, Cory LaJoie said we're not friends, which again, Cory LaJoie has had a little history being over-aggressive on super speedway tracks. I get it, though, because he's going for wins and victories, but he did end up technically causing a big wreck and an incident out on the racetrack. And I understand Austin Cindric being upset and frustrated, because while Austin Cindric was a little bit squirrely, it really wasn't Austin Cindric's fault that the wreck, unfortunately, ended up happening and taking place. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen officially made his Xfinity Series debut at Daytona National Speedway this past week. Had to actually get approved to run that, run the ARCA race, and then of course he was approved regardless after running that ARCA race. He made his Xfinity Series debut and had a very, very interesting adventure. He did have issues with Jeb Burton, kind of made a little mistake, came up the racetrack, tried to clear himself. He was not clear and turned Jeb Burton around. He was also involved in the first major incident on the back straightaway that took out like 10 cars in the race, including Jesse Love getting a ton of damage in that after John Hunter Nemechek ran in the back of Jesse Love and caused the incident and the wreck. But despite that, SVG was able to finish in 12th position. And after the race, Chris Rice went up to congratulate him on a solid debut, and even Steve Phelps went up and shook his hand, and I think also congratulated him on a solid run. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen did speak to the media, said it was very interesting, and he also apologized to Jeb Burton for the incident, said he's going to try to go reach out to him and apologize to him for what happened on the racetrack. He didn't mention Jeb Burton's name because he probably doesn't know who Jeb Burton really is, but he'll probably go talk to Jeb Burton after the event. Despite all the incidents that he was involved in, to finish in 12th place in your debut is really, really good. And I do expect that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to have a little bit of issues potentially at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but I think once we get past Atlanta, I think that we'll see SVG get better and better. And the more experience that SVG gets, he also wishes there were more practice, by the way, which I do agree with him on that. But I do think that we'll see a little bit more better performance from SVG as time goes on. To finish 12th, that's not bad. Didn't get any stage points, unfortunately, but to at least get a top 15 in your debut is really, really good. And I think that SVG is only going to get better. And I do believe that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to win some races this year in Xfinity. And I think he'll have a very solid and good year with the team in the 2024 NASCAR Xfinity Series season with the organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the last lap at the Daytona 500. We've already talked about Cindric and Cory LaJoie not being mad about each other, but let's talk about the aftermath. So obviously there's a lot of controversy at the end of this year's Daytona 500 and the final yellow that took place. Now NASCAR's explanation on why they threw the caution at the end was basically because Austin Cindric and Ross Chastain were coming back up onto the racetrack. That's why they threw the caution. They did say that if Cindric and Chastain had stayed to the bottom through the grass, they were going to keep the race green. Now, everyone was wondering if Alex Bowman had won the race, actually, and thought that Alex Bowman was robbed. But when you actually look at the photo that actually surfaced, William Byron was actually ahead of Alex Bowman by just a little bit, which is why William Byron is the winner of the Daytona 500 and not Alex Bowman. I get Alex Bowman fans being frustrated and upset with the call to give the win to William Byron, but Byron was clearly ahead from the photo surface. I think Fox did a terrible job explaining it. In fact, they just got off the air. I think they had one of their better coverages in a few years for sure, but again, they did a terrible job explaining what actually happened here, and that's on Fox for not doing a really good job explaining why it ended up happening. And again, I think NASCAR could have sent them the photo to make it a little more clear, but unfortunately they did really not end up sending the photo to them, which is really, really unfortunate, and it definitely sucks right there. That being said, though, I'm glad to see the real winner is William Byron, and it's not some BS calls. I think NASCAR made the right decision there. Again, that's what they exactly explain, and we'll see what comes out from it. Again, William Byron is the Daytona 500 winner, so congratulations to him. Regardless, Hendrick Motorsports car was going to win, whether it was Bowman or Byron, and now Byron's legacy, I think, is complete at this point. Now he's just got to go out there and win a Cup Series championship, which I think he's got a really good chance and opportunity to do that this year in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Daytona 500 TV ratings. It was reported by Adam Stern yesterday that Fox got 6 million viewers for Monday's rescheduled Daytona 500. That is down from the last rescheduled event that took place, of course, in 2020, which I think had 7.3 million viewers. But that, of course, was from Sunday as well, leading into Monday, and also Donald Trump was there. And that race was on track to have a record-setting viewership, which would have had, I think, like 10 to 10.5 million viewers, and a lot of that was, of course, due to Donald Trump being there in a re-election year. Honestly, That's some pretty solid ratings, all things considered. It being down is not great, but hey, having 6 million people still tune in to your biggest race of the year is still a lot of people. And it was up from the NBA All-Star Game, which I think is a positive for sure. I think the NBA All-Star Game had like 5.4 or 5.5 million viewers for that event. But when you think about the Daytona 500, yes, it's lost a lot of TV ratings, but if this race would happen on Sunday, I do believe that the ratings actually would have been up from the previous year. I think it could have gotten close to 10 million viewers because I think a lot of the Netflix people would have definitely tuned in, or from the NASCAR Full Speed documentary, I think would have definitely tuned in who were new fans of the sport. To me, I know people are disappointed by the ratings, but honestly, I don't think these ratings are bad, all things considered. It's good to see the ratings being 6 million. I do wish they were up a little bit for sure, maybe 6.5. I would have loved to see it a little higher, but honestly, for races delayed to middle afternoon, a lot of people worked on that Monday, of course. I think the number did increase as the day went on, as more people got off of work. But unlike 4 years ago, where more people were not working during that time, there were a lot more people working this time around, which is why the ratings, unfortunately, were not as high as I think a lot of people were expecting. If this race happened on Sunday, I think they would have been up just a little bit. Hopefully, though, we can see increases in TV ratings throughout the year and throughout the season overall as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace and Roger Carruth. Now, if you watch the Craftsman Truck Series race at Daytona National Speedway, which was a complete disaster, by the way, you probably saw after the race how Bubba Wallace pulled Roger Carruth aside. Now, a lot of people were wondering what had happened. Well, Bubba Wallace, after the race, actually was on Door Bumper Clear, I believe it was yesterday or a few days ago, and explained what exactly happened. He basically spoke on what happened after the race and basically clarified exactly everything. He told them that basically what Roger did was wrong. He pulled him aside after Roger, I think, was being a little bit all giddy, and pulled him aside basically saying, hey, you caused the wreck in the incident and you were at fault. And then Roger eventually admitted, like, yeah, I was absolutely at fault for the wreck in the incident, trying to blame Cory Hyde, trying to blame Corey LaJoie for the incident. But then, of course, Bubba was like, no, you went up there. It wasn't Corey LaJoie and Cory Hyde's fault that you ended up wrecking the guy. You went up and wrecked him. You got loose and you wrecked him, and you got to admit from right and wrong. Just tell everybody that you screwed up and made a mistake. Roger needs someone like that in his corner, and having Bubba Wallace in your corner is really, really huge, because there's not a lot of drivers that are, especially your up and coming, that are going to have that mentorship that Bubba is going to bring to Roger. And Roger having a mentor like Bubba Wallace, who understands everything about this sport, I think that is really, really huge, especially going into the future with Roger's career. Considering Roger is eventually probably going to end up in the Cup Series not too far down the road, he's going to need mentorship and guidance. And a lot of these younger drivers need a mentor like Bubba Wallace to come in there and really help out. So I absolutely appreciate Bubba basically telling him, no, you caused the wreck and the incident. Go and admit that you messed up and made a mistake, and admit that you were wrong for the situation. I think it all got blown out of proportion, to be honest, about everything. But look, Bubba wanted to confront him about the situation and to tell him that he was in the wrong for the wreck and the mistakes. You've got to admit when you're right from wrong, and I think that Bubba Wallace doing that and being there to help Roger, I think is absolutely really huge, and I think it will help Roger Carruth in a big way going forward in his career, especially in the near career of his. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, it was reported by Bob Parker. Someone asked if Kyle Busch was going to run any Xfinity Series races this year in 2024. And Bob Parker responded by saying that as of right now, Kyle Busch does not have any Xfinity Series races scheduled yet for 2024. That's really disappointing here. Kyle Busch last year returned the Xfinity Series for the first time since 2021. And while Kyle Busch was not able to score visually, I think a lot of us were expecting him to do, we all know Kyle Racing is not the fastest organization at the moment in the Xfinity Series, so I do think they're going to have a really solid year. And with the fact they've got Shane Van Gisbergen full-time, AJ Allmendinger full-time, and of course you got Josh Williams being full-time, it doesn't surprise or shock with the Kyle Busch as of now isn't going to be there. I thought maybe there would be a chance and possibility that Kyle Busch would be behind the wheel of that 10 car that Daniel Dye is running, which of course is going to run 10 races this year, according to the most recent race they ran at Daytona. But I guess that car is just going to be run in a select number of races this year, though I could see Kyle Busch maybe running it later down the road, because I do believe that Kyle Busch will be really good this year. Okay, even though the Xfinity Series field is extremely competitive, you got AJ Allmendinger this year, you've got people like Hailie Deegan running in the series, you've got SVG running in the series full-time, Chandler Smith, Sheldon Creed in different places, versus Jesse Love, who I think is going to have a really solid year in Xfinity. Kyle Busch is going to have a lot more competition if he was to run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Nonetheless, to us disappointing here that Kyle Busch more than likely is not going to be running in the Xfinity Series this year. I wish he was going to be running, but at the same token, at the same time, the Xfinity car is so much more different than the Cup Series car nowadays. It makes a lot more sense to run the Truck Series, which we'll get into here later in this episode. But nonetheless, I think Kyle Busch not running the Xfinity Series is disappointing. I wish he was going to run in it, but I think because of the fact that the next-gen car is so much more different than the Xfinity Series car, it doesn't shock or surprise me to see that as of now he is not planning to run in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at this current moment right now. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing. Now, Brett Griffin basically revealed on Door Bumper Clear that Richard Childress Racing is planning to run a third Cup Series car in 2024, which of course is a number 33 car, which Brett revealed that he'll be at the Chicago Street Course, and I believe he also revealed that he is going to be at Gateway as well. They are planning to run the 33 car for 7 races in 2024. Now, again, like I said, the number of races has been made clear, but we don't know exactly which races they are going to run. We do know they're going to run Chicago Street Course. We know that they're going to run Gateway, but other than that, we really don't know at this particular moment and particular point what other races they are going to run. If I had my guess, it would probably be some other super speed races, probably running at maybe the second Atlanta race perhaps, maybe running that car at like a couple other road course races, maybe running it, of course, at Daytona later this year, and also maybe running at like Indianapolis for the Brickyard perhaps, could certainly be a possibility. Now, what drivers could get behind the wheel of this seat? Well, there are a few options out there that could be available. You, of course, got Austin Hill, who, of course, is not running with Beard Motorsports at this particular moment. And Austin Hill, I think, wants to make more Cup starts this year. He did make a few starts at Beard Motorsports, and honestly, he did a decent job. And he drove a 33 car back in 2022 in one race where he finished in the top 20, which is pretty solid. And, of course, with Austin Hill being Super Speedway Jesus at this point, I think he would be a really good candidate to run the Super Speedway races. You've also got Brody Kosecki. I know that Brody Kosecki's been having some issues at Erebus, which of course Erebus has a really big association with RCR, but some people do believe that Brody Kosecki could end up running for RCR in the Cup Series and a select number of races this year, and especially at the road courses like Watkins Glen perhaps, and other races they end up running. So I could definitely see for sure Brody Kosecki getting some starts. Even though Brody's, like I said, focusing on supercars, even though he doesn't have a ride at the moment with any organization, I still certainly think that could certainly be a possibility for Brody. And then I think about other drivers that are free agents, like a Matt DiBenedetto who could be candidates. So I would think more than likely Matty D would not get a seat here. I would think maybe Jesse Love could be a candidate as well to make his Cup Series debut. I know he's only 19 years old, and he just made his Xfinity Series debut, but the RCR is really high on Jesse Love, so I could absolutely see him getting a chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of one of these seats. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to that when it comes to RCR and who gets behind the wheel. We'll probably find that out here soon, though, in the not-so-distant future. We'll get behind the wheel of the 33 car. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about fuel saving during the Daytona 500. There was a lot of controversy surrounding this. You had a lot of drivers after the Daytona 500 that were not very happy about it. Eric Jones was among many drivers who complained about basically saving fuel for 80% of the race. Bubba Wallace went on basically Door Bumper Clear and complained about it. Freddie Kraft was complaining about the fuel saving situation. And even Denny Hamlin expressed frustration saying, I want to race flat out 100% throughout whole entire event. Now, NASCAR, and basically the guy who basically speaks for them, Elton Sawyer, kind of went on to say that NASCAR is actually going to investigate the fuel saving situation that is currently going on at the Daytona 500, and they might have some things that are planned, including potential smaller fuel cell. I personally actually enjoyed basically the fuel saving stuff. I get it's frustrating for some people seeing these cars go 175 miles an hour and seeing AJ Allmendinger running down, which I've never seen that before in nearly 20 years of being a fan of this sport. But look, I actually really thought that it was kind of interesting to watch the fuel saving component. But I get why some people and drivers were frustrated and upset. So what are some of the solutions that NASCAR could use to fix this problem? One of the solutions is a smaller fuel cell. I think having a smaller fuel cell to where there's a limit of number of laps that they could run, I certainly could see them doing that to where they shorten like the gallons. I think they've got like a 20 or 22 gallon fuel cell for super speedways. I could see them reducing at like the 16 or 17 gallons and making it to where these guys can go flat out from the get-go and they only have a certain amount of laps, so some people could fuel save there. Another solution is basically getting rid of the sage yellows. I think that would be one of the easiest solutions for sure to fixing this problem. Yes, you got some teams that would try to exploit the strategy, but I think that would create still a little strategy while drivers be able to go flat out. I honestly personally think we should get rid of sage yellows regardless of super speedways. It'd make the race go a little bit faster as well. Another solution is maybe adding another stage. That's something that Dale Jr. brought up, which I don't entirely agree with, by the way, but I kind of understand from his perspective. The other solution is don't do anything at all. I thought the 500 was really, really fun to watch. I get drivers want to go flat out, but everyone kind of thinks, oh, the Daytona 500 back in the 2000s always was flat out from the get-go. I watch old Daytona 500s, and I don't think that's the case. Go back to 2005. A really solid 500, but they didn't go flat out. You had packs pulling away from each other. So I really just hope that NASCAR doesn't make an executive change. I really don't have a problem with it personally, the field-saving stuff going on. Again, the other thing you have to think about with this next-gen car, too, this next-gen car also has a lot of drag, which I think does create these situations. But personally, I don't have a problem with it, and I hope that NASCAR doesn't make a change to it. I get the drivers being upset and frustrated about it, but at the same token, at the same time, I personally don't have a problem with it because that's part of strategy. It's one of the bigger races and events of the year. I personally think getting rid of sage yellows would be the only solution I make. Maybe a smaller field stall could be something they could do. But personally, I don't really think there needs to be any changes that are made. I just personally don't think they don't need to make any changes to the super speedway racing. I think they actually have nailed a pretty solid super speedway package, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, Ryan Ostrander, who is a big Dale Jr. fan, posted something about Dale Jr. in regards to Junior Motorsports and them potentially going Cup Series racing. And something interesting that he noted is that Junior Motorsports apparently had an opportunity to go Cup Series racing a few years ago, all the way back in 2019. They had an opportunity to buy both of BK Racing's charters, which at the time, those charters were worth $2 million when BK Racing basically was liquidated. Now, if I'm not mistaken, those charters eventually went to, I think, either Front Row Motorsports or Spire Motorsports. Front Row ended up having a third car for Matt Tiff, and then, of course, you did have the other car that I think went to Spire Motorsports, who basically bought them up, and now Spire, of course, has now got these charters worth around $40 million because they bought BJ McLeod's charter for around $40 million. Again, at this point, there's been a lot of talk about Junior Motorsports going Cup Series racing for a very, very long time. I think there's always been a chance every single year that they're going to go Cup racing. Dale Jr. has stated recently, though, that the charters are the biggest holdup to him making the jump up the Cup, and especially with them being around $40 million now, I'm not entirely sure that he's going to make the full jump. I've seen some people suggest that maybe if SHR was ever to go back to Chevy, that they could potentially make the jump up then. But I'm not entirely sure Dale Jr. wants to partner up with a team. Again, even if he goes in partnership with Tony Stewart, it's still going to be $40 million for a charter. And we still don't have a charter agreement that is finalized at this point. We're still having major issues and trouble with that. So I think that's another thing that's holding Junior Motorsports for making the jump up. I would love to see him make the jump up, though, because Junior Motorsports being the Cup Series would absolutely be huge. They could bring some really good drivers in there. They could get some of their drivers like Sammy Smith and Justin Allgaier and Sam Mayer up Cup racing. I think there's a chance those guys could get the Cup in the future, regardless if it's Junior Motorsports or not being part of it. They could get a charter from Khaled. We know that Khaled Racing, there's a lot of talk about the future of that team, whether or not they could still be a two-car team or not. We're not entirely sure at this point. But at the same token, in same time, I look at Junior Motorsports and what they potentially could do if they ever were to get to go Cup Series racing. And I think a lot of us fans want them to go Cup racing, right? But I think there's a lot of things holding them back from making that jump up. So nonetheless, I really hope it ends up happening long term that we do see Junior Motorsports make the jump up. But as of right now, it just sounds like it's not going to happen with how much money it is. But I do predict that they might make the jump up in 25, but I don't think it's going to be announced at this particular point unless there's more charters added, especially if the charter agreement is ever ended up to be officially finalized. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories of today's episode as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. Now, over the course of the last couple of days, there's been a lot of talk and chatter that Frankie Muniz might have become a part owner of an organization in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. There was images surfaced on social media from multiple different media outlets that Frankie Muniz might have become a part owner of Joey Gase Motorsports. And the team, it sounds like it's going to be called Muniz Gase Motorsports. Obviously, Frankie Muniz is making select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year. He made his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut at Daytona National Speedway. Unfortunately, ended up crashing out. I think he finished in 36 or 37 position in the race, unfortunately. And he is going to run select more races throughout the year. He is going to run at Phoenix in 2 weeks from now. And then the rest of the schedule is to be determined at this point. If it is true that Frankie Muniz has bought into Joey Gase's organization, that is absolutely huge. Frankie Muniz, of course, who has been making his way up through the ranks. A lot of people think he's just an actor, but Frankie Muniz, in my opinion, does have quite a bit of talent. He did solid in the ARCA Series last season. I know he didn't absolutely win a race, but he did have a solid year, all things considered. And now seeing that he potentially has bought into an organization in the NASCAR Xfinity Series is really, really huge. Again, the rest of Frankie's schedule is to be determined. An announcement hopefully will come relatively soon. It's not confirmed at this point. It is just rumor, but the fact that we're starting to see shocks, we're starting to see images surface that Frankie might have bought into an Xfinity Series organization, I think it kind of confirms the reports that he is buying into an organization. Again, if Frankie is truly buying into it, that means more money coming in. I would also imagine that if it is true that Frankie did buy into Joey Gase's organization, this might mean that Ford might help this team in a bigger way. Because let's be honest, no disrespect to Joey Gase, Joey is not the fastest driver in the world. He's been a journeyman driver for many, many years. He's not the fastest driver in the world, though. Let's just be perfectly honest. If Ford's coming in to help because Frankie is high up on Ford's development group, this is absolutely huge. And you think about Frankie. Frankie's ultimate goal is eventually get into the NASCAR Cup Series. He wants to go Cup Series racing in the not-so-distant future. And seeing him already make the jump up to Xfinity, I think is huge for him. And I think he'll do better in the race at Phoenix. I think he's in a decent position at owners' points. I don't think they start going to the new owners' points till after the 4th or 5th race of the year. So Frankie should be good to get through the few races. Hopefully, if they do announce this partnership, hopefully this means more money coming in for Frankie and more success for him, because I want to see Frankie Muniz succeed. Because if Frankie Muniz succeeds, I think the sport goes in a really big direction. I mean, when it was announced that Frankie was going to be running part-time in Xfinity this year with Joey Gase's organization, a lot of people and a lot of major media outlets really talk about it, because Frankie Muniz is a household name for Malcolm in the Middle. But obviously, you look at him, you look at the success he's brought in from ARCA. He got a top 5 in ARCA last year. Hopefully, he can bring some of that success to Joey Gase's team. But we also have to remember, like I said, that Joey Gase's organization historically has not been the fastest organization in the world. We'll see how things bring out, especially if this ends up being true or not. But if it is the case that Frankie has bought into Joey Gase's organization, I think it'll be really big for the sport, and I think there'll be a lot of success coming in, especially for the sport going into the not-so-distant future, if this does report and surfaces and it ends up being exactly true to what exactly is being reported. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about DJ Khaled. Now, DJ Khaled was at Daytona National Speedway this week, and unfortunately could not stay for the Daytona 500 because it got rained out. But he was at Daytona National Speedway on Sunday, and someone had asked him a question on whether or not he's actually interested in becoming a team owner. Well, DJ Khaled said yes. He is actually interested in becoming a team owner in NASCAR. And he says that one day he's hoping to have a We the Best car out there. He has seen what Michael Jordan has been able to do with 2311 Racing, and he says it's been incredible to look at. And you look at sets of 2311 Racing up to this point already. Bubba Wallace has already won a couple races with this team. Kurt Busch got a win with this team at Kansas, and Kurt Busch is the mentor there. Tyler Reddick has come over to that team and been very, very successful as well. And I think what DJ Khaled sees is he sees a lot of success coming into play. And we all think about DJ Khaled. DJ Khaled is one of the biggest household names out there, no pun intended. He has had a lot of success in the music industry. He's had a lot of successful singles. He's had major albums. He's been a producer on many albums for 20 plus years. And he's been in the industry for a very, very long time and knows how to get it done. He's an incredible businessman and would bring a lot in. And I think a lot of the interest also coming in is due to the success of the next-gen car. We have seen a lot of celebrity owners coming into play. You think, of course, of Pitbull being a part owner of Trackhouse Racing. They've got 2 full-time cars, and they're expanding into different groups like MotoGP. You've got other celebrity owners coming into play like Floyd Money Mayweather. That team is hoping to make their first start of the year at Las Vegas next weekend. We know they've shown up recently. And now you've got interest from DJ Khaled who's interested. Now, how could DJ Khaled get into NASCAR? Well, he could partner up with an organization, perhaps, maybe get involved with 2311 Racing, maybe get involved with Legacy Motor Club, maybe find a way to incorporate himself into a team like Stewart-Haas Racing. That certainly could be possible. Another option is maybe starts his own team and becomes a focus at Honda. Remember, there's been a lot of talks and conversations as of late that Honda is in talks to join the NASCAR Cup Series right now and join NASCAR. I've talked about a lot of the channel the last week or so, but apparently there were Honda executives that were spotted at Daytona International Speedway, and those negotiations and topics are heating up relatively quickly. We do know there's other organizations that could switch over there. If SHR, in fact, doesn't get their contract signed before, maybe they go over there in the future. Maybe, of course, Inspire Motorsports goes there as well. But we could see DJ Khaled, who I think's had maybe association with them in the past. I'm not entirely sure. But that could be a potential option and possibility there, is DJ Khaled partnering up with Honda as well if they end up joining the sport. We also know that there could be more charters that come into play, which DJ Khaled, like I said, has a ton of money, and he easily could pay the $40-50 million fee or whatever the charters are going to be in the future. He could pay for those, because like I said, if a new manufacturer comes into play, I believe that we'll have more charters entering the sport. But man, seeing that DJ Khaled is actually interested in joining NASCAR, I think is phenomenal and absolutely incredible. And again, it just shows the work the next gen car is bringing. And you've got a new manufacturer interested, you've got new life in the sport currently, and there's just a lot of hype surrounding NASCAR currently at the moment. And if DJ Khaled truly does get invested in NASCAR and truly comes into sport, I think his sport will be in a better position. DJ Khaled has like 28 million followers on Instagram, mind you, and has one of the biggest brands. And if it truly ends up happening where he does become a team owner of this sport, I think this sport will grow in a massive and huge way. So we'll see what ends up happening. Maybe some drivers could go over there. Maybe DJ Khaled could invest in drivers. Maybe get someone like a Matt DiBenedetto, a Brett Moffitt perhaps. Maybe goes and works with Ford, gets Haley Deegan perhaps an opportunity there, works with the Deegan family. That certainly could be an option, a possibility for sure. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that in the future of DJ Khaled maybe owning a team, but it sounds like there is a lot of interest in DJ Khaled potentially becoming a owner in NASCAR, and honestly, I think it'd be really exciting to see him become a team owner in NASCAR. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As it was officially confirmed on Tuesday morning that Kyle Busch has announced his 2024 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series schedule. He is going to drive the number 7 truck for Spire Motorsports in 2024 in 5 races. He'll race this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway, then he'll race at Las Vegas next week, then he'll race at Bristol in March, then he'll race at Texas Motor Speedway in April, and then his final race will be at Darlington in May. We were all expecting that Kyle Busch was going to run 5 Truck Series races with Spire. It just had not been announced at the point. But Kyle Busch, this will be the first time that Kyle Busch is not competing in his own organization, because remember, Kyle Busch Motorsports was sold off to Spire Motorsports, so technically he is driving his own number 51 truck, but it's basically Spire Motorsports that owns it now. But like I mentioned, this will be the first time that Kyle Busch is competing for a different organization in the Truck Series since Kyle Busch drove for Billy Balloon Motorsports 15 years ago and still won a lot of races there. Looking at the schedule, this will also be the first time coming this weekend. This will be the first time that Kyle Busch has competed at a super speedway track since 2015 after his horrific crash that took place coming to 10 laps to go in the Xfinity race at Atlanta. He didn't want to run that race, but that was the only race that was available for him to run. Group 1001 also is going to sponsor Kyle Busch in 2 of those races. They'll sponsor him in Atlanta this weekend and then Las Vegas next weekend as well. I have to say the trucks do look really solid and good. Now, what are my predictions for Kyle Busch? I don't think he wins this weekend because it is a super speedway-like track and they're too big of crapshoots. But honestly, I look at the 4 races after that, and there are 4 tracks that Kyle Busch has historically been really good at in the Truck Series. He's won many times at Las Vegas. He won last year in the number 51 truck. Bristol, he's won I think like 5 or 6 times in the Truck Series there, so he's won there quite a bit. Texas as well. He won there, I think, the last time he ran there a couple years ago. In Darlington, he's been pretty good there as well. So I expect Kyle Busch to be a major threat and contender to win 4 of the 5 races. If you want my early prediction, I think Kyle's going to win 2 of these races. The 2 races I've circled are Las Vegas and Bristol. Kyle Busch, like I said, historically very good at Las Vegas. I think that's where he gets his first win. I think Bristol, he also wins there as well. Texas, I think he's going to run really, really good at. Darlington, I think he's going to run extremely well at as well. And then, of course, I think Atlanta is going to be probably his most unlikely race to win. But with how crazy the Truck Series has been, you really never know at this point. I know a lot of people do historically get frustrated at Kyle Busch running the Truck Series, but especially after how the Truck Series ran last week at Daytona, honestly, having drivers like Kyle Busch running the series, we have heard a lot of drivers say this in the past. Like we've heard Ryan Vargas mention this in the past. If you have these Cup guys come in and help in the series, I think it does make the series a lot better. Even though we do have over-aggressiveness, Kyle Busch is a driver who demands a lot of respect, especially out of his own drivers that he used to have. Of course, now Kyle Busch doesn't own KBM because they got sold off. But having Kyle Busch run in the Truck Series for a few races, even if it's only 5, I think is really huge. And I think he'll win a few races this year. Again, the question is who else behind the wheel of that 7 truck throughout the year. We do know that Cory LaJoie, I think, may run. I don't know if Cory's going to run any more races. We know Kyle Busch has announced his 5. I wouldn't be shocked or surprised if Shane Van Gisbergen gets behind the wheel of the seat at one point this year. Maybe we see Chase Elliott make a start in the 7 truck this year. Maybe we see some other drivers get behind the wheel. We don't know at this point who else is going to drive behind the wheel of the 7 truck throughout the season. But again, just looking at Kyle Busch running in the Truck Series, he needs to be there to really help the series and guide it and kind of maybe lead the driver meetings as well. He's already been over there as a consultant, and we've already seen success from Spire Motorsports or Spire Motorsports affiliated trucks. Rev Racing just won at Daytona, and they're technically a Spire truck at this point. So I expect that they'll see a lot of success from that team this year, and I think that Spire potentially could get their 3rd or 4th wins. They've gotten 2 wins in the Truck Series up to this point. They won with Kyle Larson last year in North Wilkesboro, and they won with William Byron in 22 in Martinsville. I expect Kyle Busch to do great, and he's going to be working with Brian Patty, who is a veteran crew chief, who is one of the best crew chiefs in the Truck Series at the moment, who's been in the industry for many, many years, won a lot of races, and has had a lot of success with drivers. He worked, I think, with Juan Pablo Montoya back in the day, and he's worked, I think, with Greg Biffle as well, and many drivers who've had a lot of success. So I'm really excited about this. I'm glad to see that Kyle Busch is back in the Truck Series, and I do believe that Kyle Busch will be extremely competitive and really fast in the races that he runs. It's huge for the series to have him back in it, and like I said, I'm just happy to see that Kyle Busch will once again be racing in the Truck Series in 2024. We'll see how he ends up doing. We'll see how competitive he is, but I expect Kyle Busch to be competitive. I think he'll get a few wins in trucks this year, and I think we'll have a really solid and a really strong year in the Truck Series in 2024. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, soon if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How many wins do you think Kyle Busch will get this year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all those stories to talk about today in the channel, including DJ Khaled being interested in becoming an owner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later this afternoon on the channel, you'll see the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Atlanta. Then tomorrow, you're going to see the Cup Series race picks at Atlanta. And then, of course, you also will see the paint scheme video, of course, for the Cup race at Atlanta. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.